So good morning. It is November 8th, 2018. It's about 8:21 in the morning. And I'm just going to spend a couple minutes discussing effectiveness in the field, right? And so in the emergency management field, how do we go about sort of ramping up our effectiveness? And I think it's super vital because the reality is the number of disasters, emergencies, crises, at least that are sort of showing up on the radar, is growing. So we have to be a little quicker, a little better, and ultimately a little more effective in sort of responding to, recovering from that sort of stuff. So we're going to chat about it here just for a couple minutes. And again, this is based largely on our classroom discussion within the last couple weeks about effectiveness and how do we do this work better? How do we do it so we're more effective and more efficient, so on and so forth. I don't think it's just learning new sort of leadership techniques. I don't think it's just getting the coolest and the newest gadgets and the best resources. And contrary to what I'm constantly saying in class, just getting better communication is not the way to become more effective. But the reality is it's all of those things sort of together. So if you've got sort of the best tools, right, and the best resources, and you've got the most up-to-date sort of communication outlets, and you've got phones and cell phones, and you've got radio towers, and you've got ham radio, all of this stuff together, that's also good. And then, to be perfectly honest, this is emergency management, and so it does require some degree of leadership and sort of management techniques and skills. So all of those things together makes us better and makes us more effective as an emergency manager. So one of the first things we need to do in order to be more effective is really have our finger on the pulse of what's going on, right? We need to be able to identify the problems that are happening or could potentially happen in our communities or our organizations, whatever that looks like. We need to have that information prior to the event actually occurring. So that's going to require us to do some degree of sort of threat and hazard analysis. If you are in an area that has a radiological plant, you probably need to have some idea of sort of the radiological world, right? If you're in a highly rural area with, strip mining or something like that, which is, we have a lot of that in Southeast Ohio, at least in the past we've had a ton of that. You need to understand the sort of the threats and the hazards that come along with that, right? If you're on the coast, that's one thing. If you're on, if you're in Ohio like we are, we have a different set of hazards, and you have to be aware of those, right? Understanding what they are, understanding their potential impact, and with that, I think it allows us, to be a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to being more effective. Secondly, in addition to sort of being able to identify what the hazards are, we need to prepare for those particular hazards, right? I'm not saying that, you could spend 100% of your budget on items on your threat and hazard analysis, and then something comes out of left field. I get that. But the reality is the majority of the time it's going to be one of those particular sort of threats that you're going to face in your community, right? If you've got a major highway that runs through your community, understand what is coming and going on that highway, because that's probably what you're going to be faced with. So that requires a degree of preparation, right? So you need to make sure you have we talk about resources, so you need to have those resources that are required on hand, or at least have the ability to get them relatively quickly. Your effectiveness will just go into the basement if you don't have the resources that you need in the case of a particular threat or hazard. And then that third one that I referred to is this technology, right, and this communication piece. And I'm no Luddite. I'm not afraid of technology, but it's really, I'm that age of people that I sort of started my education without much of it, technology in the sense of computers, that sort of stuff, and then finished with it. And so it doesn't come as easy to me as it might come to someone who's 10, 15 years younger. But it does come easier to me than it would someone who's 10, 15 years older. So I'm kind of in that little sweet spot. It doesn't come easily to me, but I understand its value and I understand why we need to have it. So everything from computers to software programs to even something that's sort of not viewed necessarily as technologically advanced, but it still is a necessary technology. It's a necessary communication function we have to have, which is, amateur and ham radio. I used to be one of those people who thought that the days of ham radio were over. But the reality is I've seen it over and over again where when everything else is falling apart, everything else has failed, somebody brings it up. Hey, do we have any ham radio operators? Because that's how communication is still able to get through. Even something like your cell phone. I mean, all of that is sort of technology that allows us to be a little quicker, off the line. It allows us to be a little better at what it is we're doing, right? There's been several times in the past where, I wanted to know what was in a particular warehouse without going and looking at sort of hard books of stuff. At one point, that was how you did it, right? You could give somebody a call and they would have to do that. But now I can say, hey, what's in that particular warehouse, and oftentimes I can access it right through my phone or my iPad, or if I'm a stationary location, I can use it to my computer. I can access that information that quick. How much more effective and efficient are we if I can tell you on the phone, click, 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 yes, we have that resource, we'll send it your way, as opposed to give me an hour, I'll track it down and I can see what I can do, right? So resources, leadership training, management training, technology, better communication methods, all of those things allow you as the emergency manager to be more effective, more efficient, and better at your job, right? Because the truth is, if we're a little bit better, if we're a little more effective in our emergency response and in our emergency, the management of our emergency, guess what? Lives get saved. Resources get saved. Property, environment is protected. All of those things that are part of our core values, our core pieces of what it is to be an emergency manager, all of those things are sort of ramped up if we're more effective. And so your job as the emergency manager is to figure out ways to be more effective, to slice time off of your response, to slice time off of the management of these emergencies. So, it's just, those are just three things. That's not a exhaustive list, but that's what we kind of talked about in class, and those are sort of the overarching pieces. So, I hope this is helpful, and thank you so much.